All right. Thank you so much, Dr. King. The screen sharing capabilities are live, and we are so excited for you to learn about micro practices.
Great. Thank you, Julisse. Hi, everybody. I thought we would actually start with an opportunity to engage in a quick micro practice here, especially because you all have spent a significant amount of time already today in front of your screens. So this invitation is open to anyone who would like to practice. Of course, if there's another way that you would prefer to ground yourself or create some space for yourself, by all means, give that a try. But I invite you to give this a shot too. So this is better done with glasses off. I'm going to take my glasses off and invite you to do the same. You're welcome to do camera on, camera off, whatever feels best for you. This is really easy and quick, like all of these micro practices are that I will be talking about with you today. We're going to start this one with just building some heat between our palms. And if this is kind of an odd sensory experience for you, you can also just kind of gently push your palms together to create heat. You can stop as soon as you start to feel some warmth. So you should feel a little bit of warmth building between your palms. When you arrive to that place, give it a couple pushes together. Then you're going to make 2 cups and just place them over your eyes. Keep breathing your beautiful natural breath. There's no need to change your breathing in any way. Maybe note the amount of pressure that you're applying to either your forehead or right under your eyes and experiment with that a little bit. See if a lighter touch feels better, if a little bit of pressure feels better. Maybe notice if your eyes automatically closed or if you kept them open. Just allow this quick sort of minute of rest for your eyes, for your mind, for your nervous system. Okay, when you're ready, if you're ready, and stay as long as you would like there. Maybe shake out your hands just a little bit, wake yourself back up. You can put your glasses back on if you took them off like me. And we will move into just a little bit of information, some kind of background information about stress, about how it manifests in the body, and how the types of exercises like the one we just did can be super duper effective in these little teeny tiny doses to sort of help you reset throughout the course of the day. Because spoiler alert, we get a lot wrong when it comes to thinking about self-care, when it comes to thinking about how we support and soothe and ground ourselves. And so I'm going to let you in on the actually true information today. So I don't think anything on this slide is going to be surprising to anybody who chose to stay on during this break to talk about stress. I would imagine that if this was appealing to you, you may be having some of these experiences too. So this data comes from the American Psychological Association Stress in America study, which they do multiple times a year. This is from October of 2022. And again, while I don't think any of this is necessarily surprising, what I do want to note is that these rates, specifically of folks endorsing the impact of stress on their ability to function, have been increasing over time since the start of the pandemic. So interestingly, for a lot of these different sort of metrics around what folks are experiencing stress about, how intense that's feeling, and what some of their symptoms are related to that, it has varied over time, but we continue to see an increase here, which is really interesting when you think about the fact that they gathered this data, for example, during lockdown, right after lockdown. I think what this helps to establish is the fact that while some conditions around the pandemic have changed, we have not collectively had any opportunity to metabolize all that we have been holding, all that we have taken in over the course of the past couple of years. And so I think what we're starting to see certainly, increases in burnout, experiences of burnout, secondary traumatic stress for helping professionals and frontline workers, but also the impact of stress on our physical and mental health. So what they were looking at here were things like experiencing headaches, experiencing fatigue, symptoms related to anxiety or depression, and that's 7 out of 10 feeling like as if they are worrying constantly. So that's a lot of stress to put on the body. And I think part of why we're able to understand the connection between worrying constantly and the development of symptoms is related to how stress is kind of managed and processed by the brain, by the nervous system. So as a caveat, I am a social worker. I am not a neuroscientist. I have learned from neuroscientists, but this is coming through a social work lens, which is to say it is not going to be perfect. It's going to be highly oversimplified. But a quick and dirty brain nervous system overview and how stress is kind of managed by our minds and by our bodies. So we can think about the brain as having these 4 distinct parts, the names of which are in those boxes on the left-hand side. Each part of the brain is associated with a set of functions. So it's almost as if each part of the brain has its own sort of set of jobs, right? And as you can probably see, those jobs become more sophisticated, more complicated as we move from bottom to top, right? So the very bottom, the brainstem, which is developing in utero, that's our core survival functions, managing our body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, all that type of stuff. On top of that is our fine and motor regulation, our sleep patterns, our arousal patterns, all of that is kind of mediated by the diencephalon and cerebellum. On top of that, our limbic area manages our relational stuff, our emotional behavior and our attachments. And on top of that, our big, beautiful cortex, that's the part of the brain that allows us to think and plan and be rational and have logic and all these different things. So the brain develops from the bottom up and does so through pattern, repetitive, rhythmic stimulation in the context of supportive relationships, right? And when we're in sort of a calm state, even in alert state, we are able to do very different things neurobiologically than we are able to do when we are feeling stressed, when we are feeling fearful, when we are in a state of alarm. We use the phrase state-dependent functioning to describe that, right? So it really matters. The brain is going to function differently depending on kind of how you're feeling and what's happening. So when we're in a state of calm, all parts of the brain are working together beautifully, fluidly, flawlessly, right? We're able to move and breathe and be in relationship and communicate and problem solve and plan what we're going to have for dinner later. But when the nervous system detects any sort of information that is deemed threatening or a particular type of stressful, which might come from the environment, might also come from the body, so pain, as an example, would fall into this category, it activates what we call the stress response. And so those 3 circles there, those are our core regulatory networks. Information comes in from the bottom, and those little circles, again, highly oversimplified, make sort of rapid decisions about which parts of the brain to turn on and off in order to sort of conserve our energy. So a really extreme example of this, if you've seen stories about people doing sort of like superhuman things in moments of crisis, like lifting a car off of another person. In that case, the brainstem is running the show. All of our energy is going toward those survival functions, which is really important because if we were accessing the cortex in those moments, if we were applying logic to that situation, we wouldn't even try. We wouldn't even try to lift the car, right? The degree to which we have access to our ability to think and plan and problem solve is related to the degree of sort of activation in the body. So when I talk about activation, that's sweaty palms, kind of the butterflies in the stomach, on the low end of things, all the way up through, having a complete sort of terror response where we are unable to even recall what has happened because we have so little access to the cortex. So this is color coded, as you can see. What that is showing basically is what part of the brain is in charge when we're in that particular state. So as you can see here, really sort of the more stressed we are, the more regressed we are, the less ability we have, the less capacity we have for things like reason and logic and problem solving and all of that kind of stuff. So this is really important because when we think about how we are impacted by stress, how we respond to one another when we're in states of stress, this is one thing that we get wrong. So, for example, if you have ever been told to calm down when you are in a state of agitation or distress, you may have noticed that that was not an effective strategy in helping you to calm down. That is partially because that is attempting to appeal to a cortex that is not accessible to the person at the time, right? We call that sort of top-down approaches. So ways of trying to talk somebody out of a stress response, trying to reason with them, trying to problem solve. A lot of the time that's not effective because what's happening is that the nervous system is activated in a way that doesn't allow us to get to the place where we can even hear or necessarily understand what a person is trying to quote unquote help us with. So you think about stress throughout the day. You think about the amount of time that we spend in these Zoom meetings. I don't know if it's true for you, but this is still a place where I spend a lot of time. Microsoft just did a study, I want to say earlier, at the end of 2022, I want to say, where they were looking at that. What's happening in terms of the brain as we are sitting in Zoom meeting without breaks. And as I just was describing, what they found was that stress tends to spike toward the end of meetings, especially as you're transitioning between the two. And the longer you are kind of seated and attempting to engage in this heavy thought work, the harder it becomes over time. And what they found was that as folks are able to build these small breaks in throughout the day, maybe between meetings even, the levels of stress decreased because folks were able to kind of come back to their baseline state, which truthfully at this point, for most of us is not calm. Let's be honest about that. Very few of us have calm as our kind of baseline internal state, but wherever we sort of are at baseline, whatever we can do to bring ourselves back down over and over again throughout the day can help to create just a more adaptive nervous system that responds in proportion to the stressor that's there. Because it is not as if those core regulatory networks can tell the difference between a physical threat to our well-being and a stressful email from a boss or a supervisor or an advisor. Our body responds sort of similarly. And so what we want is an appropriate response from the body. Julie's, I'm sorry, folks, I'm not paying attention to the chat. Oh, thank you. Julie's popped the research in there. Thank you, Julie's. If there's anything there that I should be responding to, unmute and I can address it for sure. Okay, so if trying to access the cortex doesn't make sense, what does make sense? We can bring our nervous system back into balance, bring ourselves back down to baseline through the exact same type of stimulation that is what helped to build our brains in the first place. This is exactly what I said before: pattern, repetitive, rhythmic, somatosensory stimulation. And all of that is going to be even more powerful if you are doing that in the company of somebody who feels supportive to you. We call that co-regulation, if you're able to kind of engage with other folks around these practices. But even on their own, they can be really helpful, because one of the biggest things we get wrong about self-care is we think that the dose has to be really, really big. So I need to devote X amount of time to doing this thing that is going to help me feel grounded or soothed or energized, right? Maybe that's going to the gym. Maybe that's getting a massage. Maybe that's taking time off and going on vacation. What we do is we sort of store it all up, right? We wait until we can go and do the thing. Then we go and do the thing and we feel great. Maybe we feel more in balance. Maybe we feel more calm or more energized, depending on what we need from that activity. And then we go back home or we go back to work and it's still messy. It's still chaotic. There are still emails that you need to respond to. There are still deadlines that you're up against. We kind of come right back to where we were in terms of the stress that we are holding. What's actually more effective is to engage in these smaller doses of pattern repetitive rhythmic somatosensory activity throughout the day. I'm thinking like definitely once an hour, ideally more than that. 2 minutes, 3 minutes is all we need if we're utilizing this type of somatosensory activity. So what would be examples of that? All sorts of things. Sort of intuitive healing practices, ancient healing practices that so many of our ancestors and indigenous groups engage in as ways of building community, of healing, things like humming, singing, chanting, drumming. Again, all of this pattern, repetitive, rhythmic stuff. The same with movement practices. Something as simple as allowing yourself to rock back and forth or side to side. Bouncing from the knees is one that feels really nice to me. Swaying side to side, doing some gentle stretches for a couple of minutes. Engaging in some of what we just did, some gentle self-touch, acupressure. One of my favorites, because I get headaches from all this screen time, is just to massage the point between my eyes when that's happening. I work with lots of children and parents, and one little boy taught me the practice that he called arm squeezies. Which I had known as other names, but I think arm squeezies is much better, where you simply start at the shoulders and gently squeeze your way down your arms. Sensory rich practices like working with fidget toys, proprioceptive feedback can really be helpful here. Proprioception is one, your sense of your body in space, but two, sort of the sense of force that's needed to engage in certain types of movement. And so this is a reason why weighted blankets can be really effective for folks. That gentle pressure on the body can feel good. Pushing up against a wall, pushing up against a hard surface as if you're trying to move it is a really nice way to offer your body some proprioceptive feedback, especially if you're feeling sort of agitated. That's when I like to use that one. I'm going to take you through butterfly taps in just a moment. It is a type of bilateral stimulation that's thought to sort of connect the right parts of the right side of the brain with the left side of the brain in a very particular rhythm. It is the type of stimulation that makes EMDR effective as a treatment for trauma. And lastly, breath practices. So breath practices can be very helpful for some people and very activating for other people, especially sort of prescriptive types of breathing where you're asked to hold your breath can be very activating for folks and can also lead us to over breathing. Which, as you can imagine, can add additional activation into the body as a source of anxiety. So what I encourage folks to try as you're trying to sort of get a sense of which of these practices feel good to you is to pair a small movement with the breath. So for example, one that I often teach is just to trace your fingers as you're inhaling and exhaling. So trace up the finger on the inhale and down on the exhale, which just offers sort of a way to pendulate your attention. You can pay attention to the sensation of touch, you can pay attention to the rhythm of the movement, or you can pay attention to the pattern of your breathing. Similarly, just breathing, inhale and exhale, where on the inhale you make a fist and on the exhale you open the fist. That can be a nice way, again, to give you a couple of different options of where to let your attention lie if stillness and breathing doesn't feel particularly good for you. So I am going to offer one other practice. Actually, I'm just going to leave this slide up. If you would like to try this one, again, you're welcome to do so with your camera off. I will leave mine on so you can see. You can also leave your glasses on for this one. So that's good. You will start by bring your hands in front of you, cross them, and then bring them to rest with your middle fingers just underneath your collarbone. I'm going to scoot back a little bit so you can see better. Fingers should be facing up as much as they can, as opposed to out. And again, coming to rest just underneath your collarbone here. Again, no need to change your breath. Follow the natural pattern of your breathing. All you're going to do is rotate, tapping left hand, right hand. This is called butterfly tapping because This looks like butterfly wings. Allow your eyes to do what they need to do. You can keep them closed. You can keep them open. You can let them come to rest somewhere in front of you. Again, you can play with your rhythm here and your amount of force. So sometimes when I lead this activity in groups, I hear this. And that sense of touch and sound can be helpful for folks. It can also maybe be a little bit more gentle. It's hard for me to talk during this one because my nervous system responds to it really quickly. You can also play around with movement here. Again, if that would feel nice to you, maybe swaying a little bit side to side. Okay, I'm going to stop this before I'm in too deep of a state of relaxation over here to finish this conversation. Again, I always like to end with a little bit of movement, either shaking out your hands, your arms, stretching a little bit, just to kind of bring your attention back into the space. So this idea of micro practice is one that I have been working with clients in the context of therapy for a very long time. But in 2020, as COVID was kind of taking hold, it became really clear to me very quickly that everyone needed as many tools as they could have access to help to bring soothing, bring grounding, bring energizing, whatever sort of we needed in order to get through. And so I have turned these 28 of my favorite practices into little cards, a card deck. So you can keep them on your desk, you can keep one in your bag, you can use them with your kids, you can use them during transitions. But I really recommend, even if it's not through these my micro practice cards or the practices we tried together today, I would just encourage you to think about what are the kind of quick and easy types of activity that just feel good in your body that you can be building in throughout the day, a couple of times an hour, just to allow yourself to kind of come back down to baseline so that you're able to access all of your incredible brain capacity to do the incredible challenging work that I'm sure all of you are engaging in.